For decades, Henry Winkler, the man we all knew as the Fonz, was one of Hollywood's most beloved faces, a symbol of cool, charm, and quiet strength. But behind that ever-warm smile and iconic leather jacket, Winkler carried a story few ever knew. A story about friendship, admiration, and loss, and about a man he never forgot, Jerry Reed. In the late 1970s, when Hollywood was alive with laughter and country music was crossing into mainstream cinema, two men from very different worlds met on a film set. One, a New York-born actor riding the wave of fame from Happy Days. The other, a Southern musician whose songs could make America tap its feet. Their names were Henry Winkler and Jerry Reed, and together, they shared a connection that went far deeper than show business. For years, Winkler kept quiet about the bond they formed and the impact Reed had on his life. But now, at 79, Henry is finally opening up, revealing the truth about their unlikely friendship, the lessons Jerry taught him, and the emotional farewell that stayed with him long after Reed's passing in 2008. What began as a simple working relationship between two entertainers turned into something much more profound, a story about kindness, humility, and the rare kind of respect that can only exist between two men who truly understood what it meant to fight for their place in the world. And when Henry finally broke his silence, his words left fans in tears. For years, Henry Winkler, the man America adored as the Fonz, avoided certain memories of his early Hollywood days, memories that were joyful, chaotic, and bittersweet all at once. But as he turned 79, something inside him shifted. The interviews, the red carpets, and the endless fan questions always circled back to one man who had changed his life forever. Jerry Reed, the country singer, actor, and force of nature who once shared a movie set and a deep friendship with Winkler. It all began back in the late 1970s, when Henry was riding high on the success of Happy Days. America couldn't get enough of his leather jacket and cool grin. But behind the fame, Henry wanted to prove he was more than just a TV icon. He wanted to direct. That dream led him to the set of a small, action-packed comedy that would bring him face to face with Jerry Reed, a man whose energy could light up an entire room. Jerry was already a legend by then, not just in Nashville, but across America. Known for his lightning-fast guitar playing and booming laugh, Reed had a heart as big as his talent. When Henry met him, he instantly knew this was someone special. Jerry didn't walk into a room, Winkler would later recall. He burst into it, like someone turned on a spotlight. Their first meeting happened on the set of Stroker Ace, a 1983 racing comedy starring Burt Reynolds, where Jerry and Henry worked together briefly behind the scenes. What started as a casual friendship quickly became something deeper. They bonded over their shared love for laughter, storytelling, and music. Two artists from completely different worlds who somehow spoke the same creative language. But what really struck Henry wasn't Jerry's fame or talent. It was his kindness. Between takes, Reed would entertain the crew with guitar riffs, tall tales, and endless jokes. He never treated anyone as beneath him. He had that Southern charm, Henry said years later. But it wasn't an act. It was who he was, pure joy wrapped in a cowboy hat. In Hollywood, where egos often clashed and friendships were fleeting, Jerry Reed was a rare soul, a man who made everyone feel like family. Henry found himself drawn to that warmth. During one late-night jam session after filming, Jerry handed him a guitar and said, "Don't think, just feel. Music's about heart, not perfection." That single line stayed with Winkler for decades, but as with many Hollywood friendships, time and fame had a way of pulling them apart. Henry returned to television and directing, while Jerry went back to Nashville, releasing hit songs and acting alongside Burt Reynolds in classics like Smokey and the Bandit. They stayed in touch for a while, postcards, quick calls, but the years slipped away faster than either expected. When news broke in 2008 that Jerry Reed had passed away, Winkler was heartbroken. "I couldn't believe it," he said quietly. "I thought there would always be time for one more laugh, one more story. But time doesn't wait." In interviews afterward, Henry rarely spoke publicly about Jerry's death. Friends said it was too painful. The memories were too vivid. The laughter, the lessons, and the reminder that even legends fade. But behind the silence was something else, a deep gratitude for a man who taught him to live with authenticity, to lead with kindness, and to never take himself too seriously. Now at 79, Henry Winkler was finally ready to talk, to honor the man he once called the soul of the South. And when he did, what he revealed about Jerry Reed's final days and the lesson Jerry left behind would leave fans in tears. When Henry Winkler finally decided to speak openly about Jerry Reed, he didn't start with stories of fame or laughter. Instead, he began with something few people knew, the quiet pain that Jerry carried behind that famous grin. Jerry Reed was pure sunlight, Henry said during an interview years later. But even sunlight has shadows. Most people only saw the larger-than-life country star, the fast-talking, guitar-slinging, joke-cracking Southerner who could charm anyone within seconds. But Henry, having spent time with him off camera, saw something else. He saw a man who carried the weight of his own success, a man who fought battles no one could see. Jerry grew up poor in Atlanta, Georgia, the son of a mother who worked herself to the bone and a father who wasn't always there. From an early age, he found solace in music, a cheap guitar and a burning drive to make something of himself. That hunger never left him, even after the fame arrived. Henry once said, "You could see it in his eyes, that fire to keep proving himself, even when the world already loved him." Their friendship deepened during late-night conversations between scenes. Jerry would often sit with his guitar, quietly plucking its strings, while Henry asked questions about life, success, and faith. Jerry's answers were simple, but powerful. "Hoss," he'd say with that trademark grin, "it don't matter how many records you sell if you ain't got peace in your soul." Henry never forgot that line. At the time, he was still struggling with his own insecurities, terrified of being typecast as the Fonz forever. But Jerry's words reminded him that identity wasn't about what the world saw. It was about what you carried inside. Still, there was a melancholy side to Reed that only surfaced when the cameras stopped rolling. In moments of quiet, his humor faded, replaced by reflection. He'd talk about his failures, his fears of fading into obscurity, and the pain of losing his longtime friends in the music business. He'd mask it with a joke, but Henry could always tell. "Jerry could make you laugh until you cried," Winkler said softly. But sometimes, he was laughing to keep from crying himself. Henry admired Jerry not only for his humor, but also for his resilience. Despite facing financial troubles and health issues in his later years, Reed never stopped creating. Even when the spotlight dimmed, he continued to write songs, not for fame, but for truth. In the 1980s, after Smokey and the Bandit fame faded, Jerry confided to Henry during a phone call, "Hollywood forgets fast, brother. But Nashville's home." He returned to his roots, focusing on what he loved most, playing guitar and mentoring younger artists. Henry admired that deeply. He didn't chase trends, Winkler recalled. He chased authenticity. Their last in-person meeting happened at a small charity event in the early 2000s. Henry remembered walking into the room and hearing that familiar laugh before he even saw him. Jerry, older but still full of life, greeted him like no time had passed. They spent hours reminiscing, laughing, and sharing old stories about the madness of fame. As the night ended, Jerry hugged him and whispered, "You're one of the good ones." Henry, don't ever forget that. It was the last time they would see each other. Years later, when Jerry's health declined due to emphysema, Henry reached out, but never got the chance to say goodbye in person. That regret stayed with him. In interviews, Winkler admitted, "I wish I'd told him how much he meant to me, not just as a friend, but as a teacher. He showed me how to stay humble when the world wants you to be a god." When Jerry Reed passed away in 2008, the music world mourned the loss of a true original. But for Henry Winkler, it felt personal, like losing a piece of his own history. And yet, in the quiet moments after the grief settled, Henry realized something profound. Jerry had left behind more than songs or films. He had left behind a philosophy. A belief that life wasn't about fame or money, but about joy, kindness, and connection. That belief would stay with Henry for the rest of his life. And one day, it would inspire him to do something extraordinary in Jerry's memory. For most of the world, Jerry Reed was a man of music, mischief, and endless motion, a whirlwind of energy who turned every moment into a story worth telling. But for Henry Winkler, Jerry's legacy wasn't just about the songs or the fame. It was about the humanity behind the laughter. As Henry grew older, he often found himself reflecting on the unpredictable paths of fame, how quickly the spotlight could fade, and how little it mattered in the end. Jerry had warned him about that long ago. "Hollywood," Jerry once said, "will love you loud and forget you quiet." At the time, Henry laughed it off. But now, with decades of experience behind him, those words felt like prophecy. Whenever Henry was asked about his most memorable moments in show business, his stories almost always circled back to Jerry, not because of the projects they worked on, but because of how Jerry made him feel. He had this ability, Winkler once said, to make everyone believe they mattered, from the biggest star on set to the guy holding the mic. Henry remembered one afternoon during filming when Jerry noticed a young sound technician sitting alone, looking nervous. Without saying a word, Jerry grabbed his guitar, walked over, and started playing a tune right next to him. Within seconds, the entire set was clapping and laughing. That was Jerry's gift. He didn't just perform for people. He connected with them. That moment, Henry said, taught him more about leadership than any director ever had. Jerry showed me that real greatness isn't about being above people. It's about lifting them up. Years after Jerry's passing, Henry began sharing these stories at charity events and talk shows, often bringing up Reed's name when discussing humility and gratitude. One night, during a live interview, Henry said, "Jerry Reed taught me that humor is a form of love. When he made people laugh, it wasn't to show off. It was to make the world a little lighter." That comment went viral online, sparking renewed interest in Jerry's career. Younger fans, who only knew Reed as that guy from Smokey and the Bandit, began rediscovering his music and his incredible musicianship. Henry couldn't have been prouder. In 2018, on what would have been Jerry's 81st birthday, Henry helped organize a small tribute concert in Nashville. It wasn't a flashy event. No massive crowds or television cameras, just friends, musicians, and people who had loved Jerry for who he truly was. Henry took the stage that night and spoke softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "Jerry once told me that fame is like lightning. It's bright, it's beautiful, but it never lasts. What lasts is how you make people feel. And Jerry made everyone he met feel seen, heard, and loved." Then, with tears in his eyes, Henry introduced one of Jerry's daughters, who performed her father's classic, Eastbound and Down. The room erupted into applause, not the polite kind, but the thunderous, emotional kind that comes from the heart. Backstage, Henry was quiet. A few friends noticed him looking at an old black-and-white photo of him and Jerry laughing between takes. "He changed me," Henry whispered. "He showed me that kindness is the real currency of life." In the years that followed, Henry continued to keep Jerry's memory alive. Whenever he visited Nashville, he'd stop by the Country Music Hall of Fame to sit near Jerry's exhibit, not as a celebrity paying tribute, but as a friend saying hello. He even began collecting Jerry's old records, listening to them in the evenings while working on scripts. The guitar riffs, the laughter, the southern charm. It all brought him back to a time when life was simpler, when success wasn't about awards or fame, but about connection. And in those moments, Henry realized something profound. Though Jerry Reed was gone, his spirit lived on, not just through his music, but through the people he touched. That realization would lead Henry to one final act of gratitude, one that would make headlines and bring Jerry Reed's name back into the hearts of millions. In the fall of 2024, fans noticed something unusual. Henry Winkler, now 79, gentle, silver-haired, and beloved by generations, had traveled quietly to Nashville, Tennessee. He wasn't there for a movie premiere or an award show. He was there for something far more personal, for months. Henry had been planning a tribute project that no one knew about, something to honor his late friend Jerry Reed, whose laughter, kindness, and lessons had shaped his own life more deeply than any role ever could. The idea had come to him after rereading old letters and photographs from their time together. "It hit me," Henry later said. "Jerry gave the world so much joy, but I wanted to make sure that joy never faded." The project was called the Jerry Reed Legacy Room, a small museum-style exhibit housed inside the Country Music Hall of Fame. Henry worked quietly with Jerry's family and friends to bring it to life, helping fund the restoration of rare footage, handwritten lyrics, and the display of Jerry's iconic guitars and costumes. When the exhibit was ready, Henry attended the opening ceremony, not as a star, but as a friend. Standing before a crowd of musicians, fans, and journalists, he looked around at the smiling faces and the old black and white photos of Jerry on the walls. His voice trembled as he began to speak. "Jerry Reed was more than a performer," Henry said softly. "He was proof that joy can survive even the hardest roads. He came from nothing and gave us everything: laughter, love, and light. And for me, he gave something even more precious: friendship." The audience fell silent. Then, with tears in his eyes, Henry added, "The last time I saw Jerry, he hugged me and said, 'Don't forget who you are.' I didn't realize until years later what he meant. Jerry was telling me that fame comes and goes, but decency, kindness, that's what lasts." After the speech, the band on stage began to play When You're Hot. You're Hot, one of Reed's most famous songs. But this time, it wasn't played with the usual rowdy energy. It was slow, soulful, full of reverence. The crowd swayed gently, many wiping tears as Jerry's voice filled the room from the speakers. As the song ended, Henry stepped forward again, placing a single white rose beneath Jerry's displayed guitar. The cameras flashed, but Henry didn't pose or smile. He simply stood there, whispering, "Thank you, my friend." That image, Henry Winkler standing before the legacy of Jerry Reed, spread across social media within hours. Fans from around the world commented, sharing their own stories about how Jerry's music or Henry's words had touched them. One fan wrote, "They don't make men like this anymore." Two legends who showed the world what kindness really means. In the days that followed, Henry sat down for a final interview about Jerry. His voice was calm, full of reflection. "You know," he said, "Jerry taught me that the truest measure of success isn't applause. It's how much love you leave behind. That's what he did, and if I can do even a fraction of that, I'll consider my life a success." He paused, smiled gently, and added, "Sometimes I still hear him, that laugh, that guitar. I think he's still out there somewhere, cracking jokes with angels and reminding them to lighten up." The interviewer laughed softly, but Henry's expression remained peaceful. "He was one of a kind," Henry said, "and I'll keep telling his story for as long as I'm here. That's how we keep our friends alive." As the sun set over Nashville that evening, Henry left the museum quietly, walking down the same streets Jerry Reed once called home. The sound of a nearby street musician playing Eastbound and Down drifted through the air. Henry stopped for a moment, listening, smiling through glistening eyes, and for that brief moment, it was as if Jerry was there again, guitar in hand, laughter echoing through the Tennessee night.